Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, November 25th, 2024. Pepe Escobar will be here with us in just a moment on Captain America's Delusions. But first, this. We're taught to work hard for 35 to 40 years. Save your money, then live off your savings. Unfortunately, there are too many threats undermining the value of our hard-earned dollars. The Fed's massive money printing machine is shrinking your dollar's value. Just the cost of groceries is absurd. Let me be brutally honest. I think the dollar is on its way to being extinct, not just here, but globally. The BRICS nations, led by Russia and China, threaten to remove the dollar as the world's reserve currency. Central banks have been shifting away from the dollar and into gold. And if we go to central bank digital currency, that will not only destroy the dollar, but we will lose our freedom. We will lose our privacy. They can track anything we do. You need to take care of yourself and your family. So here's what you need to do. Immerse yourself in knowledge and information. The writing is on the wall. Now is the time to consider shifting some of your dollars into gold and silver as your bedrock financial asset. Call my friends at Lear Capital, the leader in precious metals, investing for over 27 years. They help me diversify into gold and silver. They can help you too. Call Lear today at 800-511-4620, 800-511-4620, or go to LearJudgeNap.com. Pepe Escobar, welcome here, my dear friend. Thank you for
my pleasure.
Thank you for accommodating our schedule. What is the military and geopolitical significance of the new weapon that Moscow used to turn a Ukrainian arms factory into dust at the end of last week?
Oreshnik, aka Hazel.
Oreshnik means hazel?
Means hazelnut. The literal translation from Russian. But for abbreviation purposes, it's being called hazel everywhere. And the other day, I was trying to find it in Portuguese and in Spanish. I found it in French.
Well,
So
how do you say hazelnut in Spanish?
No, in Portuguese is they gave me three different meanings because I forgot my Brazilian Portuguese sometimes.
All right.
Well,
back to the Russian version.
Exactly. Nobody was expecting, and that's what made it so extraordinary. And this is what Peskov, less than 24 hours later, he said, only a very, very rarefied circle around Moscow, of course, knew about it. A new intermediate range system. And we can assume there are others. This is not the only one, But the way they were saving it for this absolutely astonishing demonstration, flying at Mach 10, and we saw the black and white videos. Dmitry Medvedev, he put it in his X account. Is this what you want? Okay, there you go. But seriously, this proves how absolutely fed up the Russian leadership is with provocation after provocation essentially by the US. NATO, of course, is an appendix of all that. I'll give you a graphic example. Today, Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov, which is an extremely cultivated and measured diplomat, he said, and I'm quoting, "The fate of Russia's moratorium on the deployment of medium and short-term range missiles depends entirely on the US approach, because they know that the escalation, at least for the next less than 2 months, until January 20, will continue." And our audience already knows that the White House reiterated that the authorization for attack MES against targets inside Russia still on. So, in fact, tonight, they launched attack MES against Kursk again. So even with the graphic demonstration of Oreshnik's power, nothing's going to change for the next few days and weeks. And that makes it even more worrying, because all of us, we are hostages all over the world of this gang, let's put it this way, that's still in power for the next 2 months.
What about the gang that's in power where you are? What about the European elites? Before we get to NATO, because the admiral in charge of NATO made an absurd statement about an hour ago, but before we get to that, what are the European elites' reaction to the firing of this weapon?
Judge, you just mentioned what Rob Bauer said. Nah?
That's what I'm talking about. If you want to go
Right,
there,
okay, yeah,
exactly. Admiral Bauer
yes,
said today that NATO is seriously discussing a preemptive precision strikes on Russian territory, as if this event, this weapon had not even happened.
Is that breaking news? They're going to do it with the hypersonic Dutch Gouda cheeses. This is the only thing they have. In fact, they are having dreams of what they would have if they were operationally as sophisticated as the Russians, to preempt a debate about the power of Oreshnik. That's what it is, in fact. And even worse, today Le Monde here in Paris leaked that Macron and Starmer are talking now directly about sending troops to Ukraine. So how crazy can that be? You know, it's incredible. They receive one of the most extraordinary graphic demonstrations of hypersonic power in recent history, and it's like nothing ever happened. They continue with their tunnel vision. It's always plan A. The mere possibility of starting to talk with Russia within the next few days and weeks disappears completely. So they still think that they have a window of opportunity to do something like an absolutely out of the charts provocation against Russia and force Russia to use, let's say, tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine, which they will never do. And the purpose of Oreshnik is exactly to say, look, we can hit anything we want, anywhere we want, and we don't need nuclear weapons for that. And still, they don't get the message.
Can Oreshnik reach London?
Yes, of course, Judge. And it's been all over the place, the exact timeline for everything. It's 7-8 minutes to Warsaw, 15 minutes here in Paris, 15 to 17 here in Paris, 19 minutes to London, and 11 to Berlin, if I'm not mistaken.
How about the other side of the pond?
That's another story, because then it will have to be intercontinental ballistic missile. And Oreshnik is, let's say, a son of the INF treaty, right? It's an intermediate range missile. And thanks to Trump, by the way, who pulled out of the INF treaty in 2019, this allowed Russia to test Oreshnik live last week. So this is it's ballistic, let's say semi-hypersonic, and not intercontinental.
And it can carry a nuclear payload, can it not?
Yes, it can carry nuclear. This was a non-nuclear demonstration because they were interested in destroying completely this missile factory in Dnipropetrovsk, which they did, by the way, because this plant, it's not overground. Everything is basically underground, and that was destroyed because it was the impact plus the kinetic energy, basic physics. Can you imagine? We saw the video, all of us, and we cannot even imagine what happened down there underground. And according to witnesses who live in Dnipropetrovsk, the plant has been completely destroyed. And obviously, we'll never have confirmation because the SBU cordoned off the area, and there's not a shred of information coming from the whole area. Total censorship.
So the Ukrainian PR people are acting as if, and President Zelensky publicly are acting as if this didn't happen.
Exactly. So Maria Zakharova Maria Zakharova is an expert in trolling the Ukrainians. Of course, it never happened. Just like that plant that you used to have over there, it never existed, and now it does not exist.
How do you account for the fact that MI6 and CIA were caught flat-footed and didn't know this thing existed?
Because they don't know much about strategic supersonic and hypersonic weapons that the Russians have been developing over the past few years. Only when they see it, only when they see a test, or in the case of Orezhnik, when they see it actually being employed. They didn't know anything about Kinzhal. They didn't know anything about the Poseidon missile. Only after they surface somewhere or they are used, and when the Kinzhal start being used sparingly in the SMO, the Special Military Operation. And if you go to very good military analysts like our friend Andrei Martyanov, Andrei's books, Andrei wrote 4 books, and in his blog, practically every day, he has been talking about the gap in ultra high-tech hypersonic technology between Russia and the US for over a decade, in fact. It's all there in his books. And in many cases with mathematical equations, arguing their point. So the only thing that the US has against something like Orezhnik is a PR war, which is exactly what they're deploying now. Saying, no, come on, it's harmless. They only had one, they don't have any more. And Putin had to go on the record and said, no, we have a stockpile of Orezhniks, and now they're going to be produced serially in Russia.
Wow.
There you go.
How do you account for Admiral Bauer? By the way, he's not an American. It sounds like an American name.
He's Dutch, Judge. He's Dutch.
He's Dutch. Okay. How do you account for Admiral Bauer, who's the commander-in-chief of NATO forces in Europe, which means he has American troops under his command?
Yes.
Saying NATO is discussing preemptive precision strikes on Russia. How could he make a statement like that in light of the ferocity and shock value of this weapon and its demonstration of Russian escalatory superiority?
Absolutely correct. And if he said that, this means that Washington gave him the go-ahead to say it. Because after all, from the point of view of the US NATO, this is a PR war, essentially. They know they don't have anything to counter Orezhnik. They had to say something to their own public opinion inside different European nations that are part of NATO, especially when you see the internet bubbling with figures. 7 minutes to Warsaw, 90 minutes to London. The average citizen in England or in Holland or in Italy and in Spain, wow, what do they have against that? Absolutely nothing.
I want to go back to what you just said about this. Admiral Bauer's statement could not have been made without permission from Washington. What do you think Washington is up to?
We don't know, Judge.
I mean, did they want to create a catastrophe and drop it in the lap of Donald Trump?
Exactly. Because in this particular case, let's say if they had a plan B, assuming that before, if they studied a plan B before, okay, what if we lose the elections and what if Trump decides to try to have a serious conversation with Putin about ending the war? How do we prolong this war? It's very, very simple. They need provocations. They need escalation. They need to continue escalating for the next less than 2 months, and then hand to the Trump administration a fait accompli, meaning, look, This war is unsolvable as it is. The Russians are even more aggressive than they were before, so you cannot end this war. And this is not only, in fact, this is the Biden administration is just the messenger. This is what, let's say, privileged silos of power and information of the deep state really want. Because after all, this is an absolutely fabulous money laundering operation in Ukraine. It simply cannot vanish just like that. Remember when it vanished in Afghanistan, they didn't have a plan B in terms of how they were going to move all that opium. They're still finding a place to move all that opium, which used to finance CIA black ops in Afghanistan. And in the case of Ukraine, okay, if we don't have Ukraine as this fabulous money laundering operation for the industrial military complex, which one is going to be next?
Do the NATO elites, which would include Biden, or I guess it's Blinken and Sullivan, not take Vladimir Putin seriously, particularly in light of this new weapon? How could they not take him seriously? How could they threaten him and expect to get away with it?
First of all, Judge, because they are totally unprepared, especially in military matters. They don't know anything about military matters, military science, not to mention hypersonic missiles. Number one. Number two, they are fanatics, ideological fanatics. So they simply cannot deviate from a narrative that they have been cultivating for 4 years, nearly 4 years, virtually non-stop. Because they will have to explain that not only to NATO and not only to the collective West, but to internal domestic American public opinion. And obviously, they don't have a narrative or a counter narrative or a parallel narrative to say, no, or we made a huge mistake. We wanted to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia. And after 2.5 years, we discovered that we couldn't do it. They simply cannot admit that. And everything that is happening, this escalation drive, and now the Russian response, let's say this is the first time in quite a while, or maybe since the beginning of the SMO, that Russia really comes up with a really hardcore response to all the escalation, all the provocations. They still need to, okay, we still, he's not being serious, he's very weak, he's not going to dare, he's not going to launch this thing against any base in NATO. It could. For instance, if the Russians prove that attack MES are coming from someplace in Poland, for instance, they said now Poland is a target.
Well, there are two new U.S.-built military bases in Poland.
In Poland, it's if I'm not mistaken, it's called Rostovo, something like that. This is where most of the attack MS come from, in fact, and the guys who operate them, in fact. So, yes, go ahead, please.
Is the deep state, the American deep state, trying to start World War III?
It's Judge. It's very hard to. I don't particularly subscribe to the current World War III debate. Let's put it this way, diplomatically and in a more educated form, raging all across the net and all across the world. No, I think we have at the moment intimations that some very powerful sectors inside the deep state would even prefer to take us to the brink of World War III than admit their strategic defeat in Ukraine. And that's what makes it so dangerous, much more dangerous than the Cuban Missile Crisis. No question about that. And these people, they are ideological, they are fanatical, and they are impervious to dialogue and diplomacy, or to sit on the same table and discuss with the enemy, which is something that happened. All of us remember that during the Cold War, this was the normal procedure. All those summits in Reykjavik and all that. No, it's absolutely impossible. And they cannot back down. And of course, if, the hidden elites, not so hidden, in many cases, they're financing all that. And they are manipulating their assets in the deep state, their assets inside the Biden administration. They are terrified because without this strategic defeat of Russia, what do they have? How do they account for everything that happened for the past nearly 3 years? And they cannot simply just, like in Afghanistan, okay, we pack up and go. No, because this is much more serious. This is a major strategic defeat for the whole of NATO. And it's happening in Ukrainian soil. It's beyond anathema for them to admit it.
Here is President Putin on November 22nd, which was last Friday, cut number 2.
We consider ourselves entitled to use our weapons against military facilities of those countries that allow their weapons to be used against our facilities. I recommend that the ruling elites of those countries that are hatching plans to use their military contingent against Russia seriously think about this.
I recommend that the ruling elites contemplating using military assets against Russia seriously think about this.
Well, Judge, obviously Macron and Starmer did not listen to it, right?
Here's a former CIA and former DIA defense intelligence analyst on Fox News. Surprising what she said on Fox, but listen to what she said about the war games scenario that the American intelligence community plotted out and what they concluded the result would likely be. Cut number 8.
So we war gamed this scenario, exactly this scenario back in the intelligence community. And we are right now on the escalation ladder, inching towards a nuclear war. The Russians and the United States are de facto right now in a war. Why is that? It is because those attackers don't fire by themselves, even though Ukrainian soldier technically can push the button, but the targeting of the weapon systems, ensuring that there's a proper flight trajectory of the missile, that it destroys the right target, the actual battle damage achieved that we wanted to achieve, it all requires U.S. personnel and U.S. satellites. This is why the Russians have stated that the United States and European targets are now in crosshairs. And every war game that we conducted back in the intelligence community ended up in a nuclear.
Wow. Now, she's Russian-born, but emigrated to the United States and worked for American military intel. Does any of this surprise you?
She got the story right, Judge. Which well, that's a plus. Not many on major networks in the US, they tell it like it is. She did tell it like it is. On the brink of World War III, we're almost there. We are on a very dangerous escalation ladder, and it would take one phone call in Washington to stop it, which we know it's not going to happen, of course. So the deep state will keep coming up with different levels of provocation. Attack MES on Bryansk, Kursk, and perhaps other regions. This is a given for the next few days and weeks.
When he was running for office, Donald Trump must have said a dozen times, he'll end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. Is that even thinkable?
No, it was not thinkable when he said it, Judge. It's not remotely possible now, especially when we look at what has leaked already of, let's say, the supposedly Trump plan to end the war, which is basically is a glorified ceasefire. The Russians will never accept it. The Russian conditions, they have been put out explicitly by Putin several times this past few months in different venues, including Vladivostok Forum, at the Valdai Club recently, less than a month ago. And if they are not acceptable, it's very simple. It will be solved on the battleground under Russian terms, which is exactly what they're doing as we speak. So they're not in a hurry. And essentially, if we could cram it all up in 15 seconds, we're back to December 2021 with those letters sent to Washington and Brussels about indivisibility of security in the Eurasian and European space. This is what the Russians want. If you don't discuss that, forget it. There's no way to end this war.
Pepe Escobar, thank you, my dear friend. The Americans have so much to learn. I hope that the incoming Trump administration is listening to you and people like you. All the best. I know this isn't a big deal for you, but it is here. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Of course, but we're going to commemorate here in Paris as well, of course.
Wonderful.
Excellent excuse to have a good dinner.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. All the best, my friend. Thank you.
All the best. Thank you, Judge. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Coming up at 4 o'clock, Scott Ritter. At 5 o'clock, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.